demand for Bitcoin transactions is going to be absolutely through the roof. Getting a transaction in a block is going to be hard. Think of Blockspace itself being included as a commodity. It's a precious commodity. It's one of the rarest commodities in the world. By certain metrics, it's rarer than Bitcoin itself.
Bob, welcome to the show.
Hello, Kyle. Nice to see you.
You as well. I thought a good place to start the conversation would just be to give us a brief background on what the current state of Bitcoin mining looks like, how it's changed over the years, and where you see it's going. Big question to start us off, but just to kind of center the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot packed into that short question. Maybe it's best to look at it chronologically. Bitcoin mining has changed dramatically over, let's say, the last 4 to 5 years. If we wound the clock back 5 years, we would see essentially no public mining companies, first of all. We would see the pools using a payout method called PPLNS, which basically means the miners get paid whenever the pool wins a block. We would see hash rate greatly concentrated in China. And now we fast forward to today. Well, we have about 30% of the global hash rate sitting with public mining companies. And that dramatically changes the perspective of the miners, not necessarily for the better, in my opinion. Pools have moved to a payout method called FPPS, stands for full pay per share, almost exclusively over PPLNS, which means that the miners get paid every 10 minutes whether the pool wins a block or not. And it's changed the perspective of the miner. And one of the things I'd like to say is what we commonly call miner, or what I've even used that term to date, very few companies that call themselves miners are really miners. They're really hashers.
Yeah.
They're providing a service. They're leasing their hash power and their capabilities to a pool. The pool performs the mining function. The pool takes all the risk of whether or not a block gets won or not. And the hasher, which is basically all the public mining companies, are really public hashing companies, and they get paid that way. And now we've seen this dramatic shift in the geographical spread of the miners, where 35% or so of the mining is in the US. We've got about 15% in Russia, slightly less than that in China. But interestingly, the superpowers of the world, in terms of military might, are also the same, kind of almost the same distribution of military might as you have of hash power. And I think we're in a precarious spot, though, where I believe that the essence of mining and the spirit of mining has been lost by a lot of these companies, because, mining, and we should even kind of define what is mining, and assuming the audience is a little more, Bitcoin centric, which I think your audience is. Mining is really the process of creating the block, meaning creating the block template, managing a local mempool, selecting transactions from that mempool to go into your block, creating the Coinbase transaction, receiving the Coinbase transaction. Those are all parts of the mining function. And hashing is another part of that. So you see, when I made that distinction between miners and hashers, the reason I made it was that what we call the public mining companies, or even most of the companies, only hash. And I'll say that even for my own company, which is called Barefoot Mining, we're privately held. But I had this realization back about 4 years ago that I was not actually a miner. It was kind of hit me in the face, that almost in an embarrassing way, because I created this company in 2017 called Barefoot Mining. And I thought of myself as a miner. And then, again, there's kind of this realization, like, no, you really don't deserve that title. like you're really not performing this function. And it was a bit of a harsh reality. Now we've changed that, and maybe we can get into this a little more, but we perform those functions I talked about because Ocean exists and Datum exists and these tools that allow us to actually be a miner. And so now I think I can proudly state Barefoot actually is a mining company. And those organizations that use Ocean mine. Also, it's appropriate for me to give proper due to Marathon, which I think is, I may have all kinds of philosophical differences with how they approach things. However, they earned the title of miner because they create blocks. They exercise their right as a miner to choose transactions and do those sorts of things. So at a minimum, they are due that respect from me for doing that.
Okay, so I understand at least when I got into Bitcoin, it was the decentralization that really was the unlock for me. When I realized that Bitcoin is fundamentally different from the rest of cryptocurrencies, it was Guy Swan, I can credit, who said
Guy's
that.
Great.
So that leads
Great
you
man.
towards Bitcoin mining and trying to understand. And I'll say I still would probably get a C- if I took a Bitcoin mining test. But you mentioned a few things. One is the creation of the block template. My understanding, tell me if this is wrong, is that is what basically you can choose, or it will prioritize certain types of transactions. So if there is a pool that's on this FPPS, all these big hash companies are just basically trusting the pool to create the template, which will then potentially have impact on which transactions get into the blockchain or to the time chain, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So if we imagine, I know the mempools are fairly low right now, right? But so a few things. Every node has its own mempool. There is no mempool. Like there is thousands and thousands of individual mempools. Now, the critical ones, from the perspective of block creation, are those nodes that create templates. And those are very special nodes. Foundry has one. Antpool has one. Barefoot Mining has one. Marathon has one. We all manage our own. I have several actually, but so that node has a mempool, and that mempool, let's just say for argument's sake, has 100,000 unconfirmed transactions. So I've sent you some money. You've seen the message broadcast, so you know I've sent it to you. But you also know that if that was, let's say, to buy your car, until that thing is confirmed and in a block, you probably better not give me the keys and the title, right? So now, as a miner, let's also assume a block just got mined. So it's time for a new block. So I'm going to go look into my mempool at this 100,000. And as a miner, I can pick whichever ones I want into my template. And I view this as maybe the most critical function in maintaining censorship resistance, is that each miner can pick their own, right? And this is a bit controversial in the technical side, especially maybe relative to the devs. The devs, for instance, would want us to be able to predict with high accuracy what transactions people picked. I view it differently. I think having a lot of randomness in this is actually a very good thing, not being able to predict it. But the point being that I could, in my case, I can set the criteria however I wish. The common way is to just say, well, I have a certain amount of space in the block. It's 4 million weight units is the technical measurement. And so I'm going to just pick the transactions that provide the highest level of fees and fill that up. That would be the simplest form. But the reality is nobody really does that. Okay, even let's say a foundry. Because what a foundry is going to do, a foundry type pool, I don't want to say that specifically, but what they're going to say is, well, they have to make payments to miners, as an example. So the first thing they're going to do in their template creation is pick their own transactions at no fees. Why are they going to pay fees on a transaction they can process themselves? So they'll put their own transactions to pay their hundreds or thousands of miners into that template. And then they might go pick the highest ones. But other people might say, well, I have an aversion to spam. I may not pick the most expensive ones because I'm a monetary maximalist. I'm going to filter this stuff out. So like even and like in ours, we run knots nodes, and one of the interesting options within a knots node is that it allows you to very easily give preference to what's called coinage. So it means that if, let's say, I was sending you that transaction, Kyle, and maybe I'm not paying the highest fee, but the UTXO I'm using is 10 years old, you can pay homage to an OG within your template creation by saying, I'm going to give a certain level of preference to old UTXOs because I view that as probably purely a monetary transaction. I'm honoring this person for hodling for this period of time. So, but the point being that this is an important thing. And as I said, I believe it's a very important way of creating censorship resistance, because you can pick it the way you want and I'll pick it the way I want. At some point I'm going to win a block, and at some point you're going to win a block, and it keeps the ability of somebody to get stuck and never get processed. Because in a world, one of the things I think that people miss, especially in a world where we're in a low fee environment and there's not a lot of transactions, is, well, that's going to change. Especially if Bitcoin is what we all think it is going to be. Getting a transaction in a block is going to be hard. Think of Blockspace itself being included as a commodity.
Right.
And it's a precious commodity. It's one of the rarest commodities in the world. By certain metrics, it's rarer than Bitcoin itself. It's a wild concept, right? But it isn't, in any window of time, it's an absolutely scarce resource. And so the miner, being a miner and being somebody that actually gets to pick, is I think, both a huge privilege, and it comes with a lot of responsibility. So, and I have no idea if I even answered your question because I started rambling there.
No, I asked a not the best question, but where I was going with that is just thinking about the future of Bitcoin. I've heard you say before that, your mission or part of your mission is to see Bitcoin be money for the next 1,000 years. And that's a big difference than the next 10 years or the next 20 years. And I think the ability for mining to remain, for Bitcoin to remain decentralized and secure, comes down to the mining. We know that the subsidy is decreasing over time. And so the current economic viability of mining is going to change. And so to your point about Blockspace, it's not going to be, oh, we mine to make the subsidy. It's going to be other economic reasons like access to Blockspace itself that will be valuable. And so maybe just pull on that a little bit more for me and describe kind of where you think we're going if all that is to be true.
Yeah. I'll preface this whole thing by saying there aren't a lot of people that agree with me within the mining community. So I'm a and that's okay, right? I'm very comfortable that my position is sound.
But what do they disagree with? I don't.
Well, what they view is the common view, and this is a disagreement I have even with like the Bitcoin core devs, is they view mining as the pursuit of the block reward. Okay, they view that as the goal of a miner, to pursue the block reward. And they think that they are essentially motivated by maximizing that number above all else. And they believe that anybody that does not pursue that strategy will fail. And I think they're wrong. And I think the reason is what we're talking about. That I'll give you a couple examples. The first example is I do like to think in the long term. I try to view myself as a technologist or a futurist, and I've been doing this for 40 some years in other industries. And the way I view it is, let's move forward to a point in time far enough away. It's more than 10 years away, because at that point we start removing the bounds of the way things are, and we can start thinking without being constrained by Marathon does this, or Riot does that, or Foundry does this. Like, we can get away from that. Now, imagine also Bitcoin has achieved a high level of success. Maybe it's the world's reserve currency or reserve asset, but at a minimum, it is a major force within the world, at least on par with, let's say, gold today in terms of the way that the asset is valued. Now, at that point, the way I look at it is, if that's the case, then demand for Bitcoin transactions is going to be absolutely through the roof. We'll also be at a point where, if you are a financial institution of any worth, providing services to your client base is going to require providing access to Blockspace. You can't do your business if you don't have access to Blockspace. I'm going to use, for argument's sake, I'll use Bank of America. But it may not be Bank of America. It may be Coinbase. But some large financial institution, right? So if you're that financial institution and you are trying to secure a new large client, let's say a Fortune 500 company, I think it would be very logical that in your pitch to them, you would include access to Blockspace as one of your services. You're going to do all the traditional things. You're going to give them loans. You're going to give them custody. You'll give them access to derivative products, probably insurance. You'll have all this portfolio of stuff. And one of the services you'll offer them is mining. But you probably won't look at mining as your moneymaker. You're going to look at your moneymaker as, for instance, loans. Banks make most of their money loaning money, right? So what I would do if I was Bank of America in that position is, I would go to this potential Fortune 500 company and say, hey, do your banking with us, which probably is a combination of fiat and Bitcoin. You, here is your line of credit. Here are, the derivatives that you can use, your hedging products, your all these sorts of things. Here's your insurance. And by the way, every month you get 100 free Bitcoin transactions. We will guarantee you access to Blockspace, and it's free. So in that case, mining is a component of a bigger suite of services. So the miner, which is also the banker, is economically motivated. I am agreeing with the other people, but mining is not a self-contained business. And the measurement of the economic value is by the value of all the profit and all the services that you provide to that client. So in order to do that, as that financial institution, you are either going to have to be a miner, or you will have to pre-buy space with a miner and give preferred access. So in other words, when Bank of America offers 500 free transactions a month to this one and 100 to this one and 20 to this one or whatever, they will have a special arrangement with a miner or mine it themselves. And, that will mean the block template is not prioritized based on the fees. It's prioritized based on, this other factor. Now, another example will be the nation state.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a country, I like to use Israel as a example for this. Israel's a controversial country. I mean, some people love them, some people hate them. I'm not here to make a judgment, but just say, if you're the prime minister of Israel and you know that at any moment in time the wind may change such that Western powers, which control the fiat monetary system, for instance, like SWIFT, they could cut you off at the knees at any moment. And so if they do, which they have done to North Korea, to Iran, to Russia, like it's not an uncommon thing, that hey, you better have some block space that you control. And in this case, they probably do need to be the miner, or at least have Israeli companies that will mine for them, and that have an agreement that they will include transactions as specified by the government. Because now, if they get kicked off and they need to sell oranges to Paraguay and buy, I don't know, copper from a country in Africa, they can do it still because they have control of block space. So again, in that case, they're the miner, and they're not always going to prioritize based on the block reward. Their motivation is not to earn Bitcoin. Their motivation is to sustain the economic sovereignty of their country, and potentially even view it existentially that their country could go away if they can't have this. So what's interesting about this, though, is that you've mentioned several times about decentralization. Well, this could be the answer to the decentralization in a weird way, where if you have 40 countries around the world, which each take 0.1% or 0.25% of the global hash, and they keep it under their control, and you have 40 or 50, 60 major financial institutions, maybe even hundreds of them, that all either mine or buy block space control. Now you have a decentralization. No one power is acquiring enough to 51% attack or impose censorship on the network. But we get away from this terrible position. I didn't explain it explicitly earlier, but the top 6 pools today make 90% of the templates. And those top 6 pools are 4 Chinese companies and 2 American companies. So there's not a great deal of diversity, and there's a great deal of risk in our current situation.
Right. And those 6 people probably know who each other are, could get on a phone call and collude in some way, in theory.
They absolutely could, and they could do it themselves if for some reason they were motivated to. They could come through the government, the Chinese and the U.S. don't cooperate on a lot today. But again, when you don't want to count on an ongoing political situation, whether it's to the pro or the con. So you don't want to assume that the U.S. government and the Chinese government are not going to cooperate on something and say, hey, let's impose OFAC compliance, or maybe it's not even OFAC compliance. Maybe it's just a certain blacklist. Like, hey, we both agree that here's a group of people. They may not be people, by the way, you and I consider terrorists. they may be people like, hey, we know this is Bob and we know this is Kyle, and these guys are causing problems because they're on these podcasts saying things we don't like. And we might just find, hey, our transactions get stuck. They take forever to get processed. Maybe they never get processed. So there's different levels to this, and we shouldn't assume that it's all overt and easy to recognize.
So, okay. So what I'm hearing from you is that actually the transition to nation states and institutions mining Bitcoin could be more decentralized than it is today, right? And
very obviously that's very controversial. I know it gives a lot of people, like, sends shivers up their spine.
We hate the government, of course, you
hate that's kind of a common thread. But there's a whole thing is like, Bitcoin is for enemies, right? And we don't decide who participates in Bitcoin, and we can't assume that if Bitcoin continues to get traction, or even at its current level, we can't assume that the people we don't like will continue to not want to participate. We've already seen the pivot, right? In a lot of cases, U.S. government is now pretty favorable. We've now seen a lot of Wall Street convert from, the Jamie Dimons of the world have acquiesced. The Larry Finks have, jumped in with both feet. These kind of things were, we were talking earlier, like about 5 years ago. 5 years ago, these were things that were just very difficult for me to imagine in the short term. I viewed it as happening eventually. I think most Bitcoiners probably did, but these companies, they're smart, and they're not real Bitcoiners in that sense, but they're not stupid either.
Sure.
And they see opportunity, and they also see threats, and the only way to mitigate that is to participate.
I remember what I was thinking. So Jeff Booth, he talks about how there's two different systems: the Bitcoin free market world and the controlled fiat system, debt-based monetary system that we live under, and they cannot coexist for the long term. During bull markets, people, in my view, I've been in Bitcoin for 5 years, so I'm still relatively new, but it's like I'm seeing what I heard you say a lot on other shows is complacency. They see the price going up and they're just thinking, let me sit back, let me hodl, and basically just abdicate is another word that you use a lot. Abdicate the responsibility of taking action. Do you see complacency? Or I guess the question is really like, what is the average person called to do in this situation where the government might be pro Bitcoin on the surface, but we both know that behind the scenes, they're looking to control the on and off ramps. Like there's this samurai ruling where they're putting these guys in jail for years for writing open source code. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword where the price is up. The current government or the current regime in power is pro Bitcoin in to a certain degree. But what would your call to action be to someone, just an average pioneer, not pleb, pioneer? Is it home mining? Is it, spending Bitcoin, building circular economies? Like what would kind of your message be just for everyone?
Well, thanks for bringing it up, first of all. And before I answer the specific question you asked at the end, Jeff, who I respect a lot, and I know Jeff, we've interacted quite a bit over the years. I do agree with him. I think the question is not the end state. The question is, what is the period of the crossover? And that's a hard one. I'm 61. Will I see it? I'm not sure. Maybe not. But I am very confident I will see Bitcoin be a major force within the world, and a monetary network that is heavily relied upon. You mentioned earlier, I think it was maybe before we were on, that you were going down to El Salvador, and I've made visits there and was a guest of the government a couple times. And one of the things that was apparent to me in some of my conversations with some of the officials there was something we talked about before, which was they want to be a sovereign nation. They're maybe at the forefront of ensuring that, especially as a smaller scale country. And Bitcoin provides that. This very thing we're talking about, they already do mine there. They have built a reserve. Those are the two most important things. And what they are doing is kind of getting to the next piece of the question is they're trying to build an economy where they have, or build a society where they have Bitcoin citizens. So I think obviously they would want people to be first and foremost citizens of El Salvador, but I think secondarily being a citizen of Bitcoin. And, what does it mean to be a citizen of Bitcoin? Well, it's very much like being a citizen of a nation. So if you're a citizen of a nation, I believe that you must do things like you must vote. If called upon, you must bear arms. You must serve in jury duty. You need to pay your taxes. You do these certain things that ensure that the nation can sustain itself. If you don't do any of those things, and one person of 350 million in the US doesn't affect us, but millions or tens of millions of people who take that apathetic view of it start to create a strain. Now, and we see that strain, right? You see, my stepson is a drill sergeant in the Army. They're having a really difficult time getting candidates to serve in the military these days. It's just not. People are not called to duty. Look at the voting. How many people actually vote relative to the number of people eligible to vote? It's pathetic. Look at a jury duty. Everybody looks at it as a pain in the ass, not as a civic duty. Of course, we all complain about taxes, but I think the main reason we complain about taxes is we know that it's just frickin' abused, that the money's not going to the right things and not serving what we want. Well, in Bitcoin, if you own Bitcoin, you become a citizen of Bitcoin. That's the price of entry once you own Bitcoin. And I think there are roughly analogous functions within the system. If you run a node, you are a voter. And I think we need voters. And by the way, probably one of the, beyond mining, the thing that's maybe most exposed within the network is we're seeing people come into Bitcoin at high levels, but we don't see node growth. So, but if we say that's roughly analogous, mining is probably somewhat analogous to the military, or kind of the protection of the system. And we don't have a tax system, but the network requires activity. It requires these fees we talked about, right? And so whether it's direct or indirect, as I said before, but the network requires activity. And so those people that don't use Bitcoin when they can use Bitcoin, I think are doing harm to the network. And if you're not doing any of those things, and by the way, there's other ways to contribute. You are trying to educate people by having a show. I'm coming on your show. You can go to meetups. You can at Christmas or a birthday, you can give somebody $25 of Bitcoin that never had it before. You can, and I would say all those are great things. But if you don't do shit, you just sit there. You bought your Bitcoin, and you're gonna let Bob and Kyle and all these other people secure the network, run the nodes, build the mining operation, like do all this sort of stuff. Well, that's selfish. And if the selfishness perpetuates beyond a certain percentage, then that creates a threat to Bitcoin. Because as you said, there's a number of different things. But I think the easiest thing for people to do is just use it. And I've been critical of the word hodl, which I know is controversial. But when I'm critical of it, I'm not telling people don't build a big stack and keep making that stack grow. But you need to separate that from using Bitcoin. And so even if it's a custodial Lightning wallet, like, go get a Strike wallet. It's like a simple thing to do. You don't have to be technically literate. Go throw $100 of Bitcoin into that wallet, and go to Steak and Shake and buy a burger. Go to a flea market and find somebody selling bracelets and buy an $8 bracelet with it. Your activity creates momentum within the network and sustains it. And one of the things I've talked about with this is technologically, there's something called Metcalfe's law. And Metcalfe's law is a way of expressing the value of a network, any network. And it's a very simple equation. It's the value of the network is equal to the square of the number of users in the network. So it says that, and a great way to see this is, let's wind the clock back 45 years. And Kyle, you have the very first cell phone, the very first one, right? Well, at that point, the cell phone network has one user. And we'll ignore that you could actually call somebody on a landline. What are you going to do with it, right? So the network has no value with one user. But if I get a phone and you have a phone, now the network is dramatically more valuable because you can call me and I can call you. Now imagine when 2 more people are added to the network. Now there's 4 people, and now I can call any of 3 people and you can call any of 3 people. And now imagine 100 or 1,000 or 10 million. Well, this thing grows, and it's the same with Bitcoin. But if you are part of the network, but you don't use it, you actually cease to become part of the network. Like, we don't get to count you as part of the X squared. We now are X minus 1 squared. And so I think it's the simplest thing to do, and it's the starting point. I'd love to tell you all, run a node. Love to tell you at least buy a BitAxe or something like that. And wonderful if you are, but if you aren't, it's okay. Just go spend some, use some. And when you spend the $100, go refill it, and have a different account that has a bigger stack, and leave that one alone. Like, I found that a surprising number of people have a difficulty with this concept of separating 2 stacks of money. Like the cash in my pocket, which I really don't have any right now. I don't do it much anywhere. But it's like, can you differentiate the cash in your pocket from the money in your 401k plan? Like, it's not hard for me to make that distinction, and I think it's the same analogy.
Yeah, this is a topic I'm quite keen on. As you, maybe I didn't tell you this, but I'm making a film in Bulgaria called Build on Bitcoin. And
Fabulous.
Ivan and I are partnering on that. And the whole thing is like inspiring hodlers to become builders, because I think there's so many people. Myself, I came to this conclusion where I was listening to podcasts, consuming content, opened a Twitter account, and I was like, I want to do more, something more. And I have a question specifically about you and getting into Bitcoin. But
Sure.
For me, it's funny. You know, Michael Saylor says never sell your Bitcoin. Anthony Pompliano says spending Bitcoin is an idiot test, and I'm like sitting here. Money is money. If you spend $10 of fiat, you could have bought Bitcoin with that. In theory, I think it's
Yeah.
Parker Lewis has a good perspective on that. But yeah, people have
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
inability to look into the future. For me, it's looking at the future and saying, if I have Bitcoin, I want to be able to maximize the optionality. I want to be able to spend it on goods and services in the future. I don't want to have to go to a bank to convert to fiat in 20 years to then buy the goods and services. Where'd you get the Bitcoin? What price point did you buy it at? All these things. So in
Yeah.
my view, it's in my economic interest to spend the Bitcoin today. Generally, it's when the other person is accepting it as Bitcoin. There's these services where you can convert straight to fiat through a debit card or whatever. Less
Yeah.
bullish on that stuff. But I am curious about this concept of building on Bitcoin. You had a long and successful career in technology, and many may have called you crazy. I don't know. Moving into Bitcoin, what was that moment? I haven't heard you speak about this, where you had the aha moment. You wanted to actually align your life more with Bitcoin.
Great question. I would want to reverse one thing too. One thing I think that you made a really important point, like that I think needs to be emphasized. I'll go back to Steak and Shake. Okay. If you're going to go buy a burger at Steak and Shake and you're presented with, let's say, a $15 bill, and you can use your fiat, you can throw your debit card or your credit card in there to pay, or you can use your Lightning wallet. Think about what you're doing if you spend the fiat. You're feeding the system we're trying to beat. And so all you're doing is moving that energy there. So I'll go back to what Jeff Booth says, right? So like Jeff, and by the way, I don't do this myself, but like Jeff's kind of exited from Twitter and gone full Noster, right? And if you ask him why, he says, well, I don't want to feed that side. I want my energy on this side. What's the same thing? Don't feed that. What you're doing is you're prolonging the life and feeding that side. Or you can feed the Bitcoin side. And you help the merchant, you build the network. So I think that's really important. And I don't agree. I don't even know. I've never asked Saylor or actually Pump blocks me, so I don't, whatever. I'm not sure what I said at some point in the past, but I think it was because I said some things during the BlockFi thing that he didn't like. But anyway, I'm not even sure that's being interpreted properly, because I'm pretty sure they're smart enough to do exactly separate what I just said. When they say don't spend your Bitcoin, they're saying don't spend your stash. They're not saying don't do a Lightning purchase, like or even an on-chain payment for a bigger thing. So okay, so I said that. Now my aha moment. It's interesting because I really didn't have an aha moment. It was gradual for me. And the reason was that I got involved in this space in 2017. And the reason I did was, as you've kind of alluded to, maybe for those who don't know me, I came from the personal computer industry. I was the chief technical officer at Gateway, which was at one time a Fortune 200 company, one of the largest personal computer makers in the world. And so I had received a phone call from an acquaintance from back in those days who said, hey, Bob, I need you to build some Ethereum mining servers for me. A lot of them, like hundreds of them. And at that time, it was difficult to find professionally designed equipment. So I got entered this space through the shitcoin side and with the mindset of I'm essentially building computers for somebody. Okay. And it was a large order. It was a multi-million-dollar order. And I created this company to fulfill that order. Then after fulfilling that order, we went to some other folks and said, hey, we built this. Would you like to buy some? And a lot of them said yes, but most of them that said yes said only if you host it for me. See, the first guy had his own farm, but the next group of people, somebody that wanted to buy 5 or 10 or whatever, would said, well, I'd like to do this, but I don't know how to run it. And so will you run it for me? So we went and leased the data center and started filling it with this equipment. Well, after finding some success with that, I started to kind of look back at what we were doing. What is Ethereum? And I realized I didn't like it. And I didn't like it for a couple reasons. One was it was amazingly complex. And I come from a technology background. And one thing that I've learned is simple is always better. And they were trying to do so much. I go, there's no way they're going to pull this off. Like, it's too much. It's too complex. They're trying to be too many things. I also happen to have been involved in Austrian school of thought going back to around 2001, 2002. And I started to see that Bitcoin had this superiority of the 21 million cap and the way the money supply was issued. And then the coup de grace was Ethereum said, we're going to move off of proof of work, which, by the way, was a message to me, my company, and my customers that they were going to shit on people that had poured a bunch of capital, a bunch of effort into this. So I dug deeper into Bitcoin. And like I said, it wasn't necessarily one thing, because I did the same thing that I think a lot of people do, especially if you have a technical background, is you think there's got to be a problem with it. There has to be a gap. And, you know, it's going to get hacked. It's really not decentralized. You really can't control the hard money cap, like all these sort of things. And then you start going through it and realize, no, they actually did solve this problem. And by human standards, it is essentially perfect. It was technologically one of the greatest developments in the history of mankind, especially from one person, or as we maybe it's a small group, but right from this small group of people came this thing that it's not like the internet, which obviously is wonderful, or AI, but those are the efforts of massive groups of individuals over decades. This was really one guy. I believe it's one guy that came up with this thing. And so by late 2018, I was of the realization that Bitcoin was it. It both the Austrian side of me and the technologist side of me both came to terms with this is as good as it will ever be. Like and you mentioned earlier this 1,000-year thing. Like, I believe Bitcoin can be money for the next 1,000 years. I believe it has to be money for the next 1,000 years. If not, I have a very dystopian, dark view of the future. And like, I have 7 grandchildren now. And so I don't think about, don't get me wrong, I love making money. I want more money. However, that does not motivate me. That is not why, but I've never really been that way. That's why I'm a technologist, right? I probably paths I could have made a lot more money, but I want to solve problems. I want to hopefully leave the world in a better place than I found it. Hopefully I've done that, but I still want to do more. And I think about, like, I had a new grandson and granddaughter, both born, one in September, one in October. So they're born in 2025. They are going to be alive past the turn of the century, God willing, right? Statistically, they will be alive. And their kids will be alive past the last Bitcoin subsidy being issued. And their kids will be alive into 2200 and beyond. So, I'm connected to I can see that now. I'm connected to that part of the future. And you're obviously a much younger guy, Kyle. So, just do that for you, but add 30, 40 years to that whole thing. And so I got to fight for that, right? I mean, that Bitcoin has to win, because if they don't, we're going to have this, do you know the term panopticon? You ever heard of that?
No, I mean, I've heard it, but what does it mean?
Okay. So panopticon was a prison design. It was designed in the 16th century. And the issue was, in a prison, how do you create a prison that maximizes the use of guards? So how can you keep control of the maximum number of people with the minimum number of guards? So they built this system where the cells for the prisoners were arranged in a circle, okay? And there'd be multiple floors. And down the middle was a tower. And the tower was built so that one guard could see into the cells simultaneously. He could see anybody within a 2-floor radius, and he would be looking through these little slits, and it was impossible for the prisoners to know if they were being watched or not. And so, and again, this is 1600s, right? There's no electronics, right? So, but what they learned was that psychologically, it was as though each prisoner had their own guard watching them, because if you never know that somebody's watching, you assume they are watching, and you behave that way. So you become kind of a slave. So this is kind of the technologist part of me, we're now moving into a world where the dystopian view is pretty grim, because we have a digital virtual panopticon where each person with AI, facial recognition, they have in China, I'm sure they have it in the US too, they have gait recognition. They don't even have to see your face. They can distinguish who you are based on the pattern of the way that you walk. You tie that with a CBDC. Well, it looks like Europe's going forward with their their digital euro. China's already got it. If Bitcoin doesn't exist as an outlet to prevent people from being completely in prison, it at least fights the financial side of it, right? We got to have this. And it's one of the unknown things about Lightning. Lightning, in its pure form, has a greater privacy than Bitcoin. And so, it's just so important that we win, and it's so important that, because I did a tweet the other day. We're kind of going a little bit beyond Bitcoin, but I tweeted about a week or so ago, and I said, it's my advice to every nation of the world to, in effect, close your borders right now. And it's not racial, it's not anything. What I'm saying is that AI and robotics, drones, all these sorts of things are advancing at a rate that is so rapid that the amount of worker displacement is unimaginable. And unlike previous technological trends, including the one I was part of in the personal computer industry, we're not just going to affect, in the case of the personal computer, it was very clerical. If you were a typist, if you were an admin, those were the kind of jobs that really got hit hard and displaced. But there was an offset, which was software developers, website development, like these sort of things kind of offset some of that. So there was a transition of one set of jobs to another, but the net impact on the economy, on the job market, was still positive. AI and these associated things are different because, like, even now, I can go on and I can say, I don't do much coding anymore, but I can go in and say, hey, I want to add this or that to my website, and it'll just write the code for me. And it works, and it's phenomenal. Well, I'm displacing a coder or web developer with that, but there's no offset. Like, so what I'm getting at is, and I guess this does relate back to Bitcoin, is all of us need to be prepared for our jobs to go away. Now, doing like what you're doing right here, or hopefully what I'm doing, we're probably more insulated. But especially if you work in a company doing something, no matter how professional you are, no matter how much education you have, you're at risk. In fact, maybe you're even at greater risk than the laborer. Like if you're in a skilled hands-on position like a plumber, you're probably the safest. Like, that's going to be the hardest thing for the robots and the AI to displace. But if you're a bookkeeper, if you're an attorney doing trademark law, like, I'm not saying you're screwed, but your profession is going to get called, and you don't have an obvious place to go. So I'm saying close the borders because we're going to be faced with rapid levels of job displacement, and so any country needs to run a net labor shortage right now so that they have a buffer against this coming. And then each of us needs to save a shitload of Bitcoin. So I am telling you to save, still spend some, but save a shitload of Bitcoin, because if you're affected, now you have the security to bide your time and find your way in this new world. Those people that don't have that safety net are just going to be in an absolute world of hurt.
Yeah, I get asked the question quite often. You know, I'm a videographer by day. Are you worried about AI taking your job? I identify, I am a creative person. I'm confident that no matter what the future holds, I'll figure out a way to add value to the market. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're giving me chills almost, like thinking about how big this transition is going to be. And the argument of we need immigration is, oh, who's going to build the houses? Who's going to, pick the strawberries, all these things. And so, yeah, I think it's taking a slightly longer time horizon, but time moves quick. I'm 31 years old, and 10 years, like, the world's going to look very, very different. And I agree with you that owning Bitcoin is going to be, there's going to be those who, did own Bitcoin and those who don't. It's going to be a big diversion or a divergence.
Yeah. And if you are, like in your case as a videographer, well, don't fight it. Be the first to embrace it. So be the videographer that learns how to use AI, and you have a great chance of being a survivor and thriver. Those that resist, they're going to be screwed. And I'd say that for anything. My wife runs a virtual assistant. My wife's from the Philippines originally, and she has a team mostly of RNs, and they provide virtual services primarily to doctors in the U.S. Everything from like appointment confirmation, helping with billing, anyway, a whole suite of services that they do. And she and I had this conversation within the last week. Like, what she has to do is, her clients are going to find that AI is beneficial to them. So what she has to do is be in front of it and be better at using AI than them, and come up with a whole new suite of services that she can provide using AI. Because otherwise, maybe not next Tuesday, maybe not next year, but at some point she'll find herself out of business if she doesn't. And so you can embrace it, or you can say, oh no, humans will never be as good as AI at this or that. And I think people in the creative area are probably especially exposed, because I think whether you're a musician or a videographer or a writer or whatever, I'm sure you take great pride in what you do, and you want to have this creative outlet, but you can't fight it. Like in music, the music I hear now blows me away. I'm sure you've seen some of that, where either, and sometimes it's an original song or sometimes it's a new take on a old song, but like there's shit I want to buy all the time. Like I'm like, where can I get it? Because it will find its way onto one of my playlists. That's already happened. And in film, if you're an actor or an actress, I'm not quite sure what to say. But I guess that's for them to figure out. I'm sure there will be some way for a real actor and actress to exist, but maybe it's only on stage, because in film, it's going to be really difficult. And so you better be a damn good stage actor, maybe.
Well, I'm optimistic about the future, largely because of Bitcoin, but I think there will be a resurgence of in-person events, of theater, of things that can't be like. People are also going to
Yeah.
realize that these screens are killing us, and that we should, going into real life and experiencing
Sure.
those things. And also to your point about craftsmanship, I had a really good talk with Scott Deedles about this. Do you know Scott?
I do. Yeah.
And yeah, he was just talking about how, true artistry and craftsmanship will be valued, because Bitcoiners, if they're going to buy something, they're going to want something of high quality, something they can have in their home or use for 50 years
Sure.
instead of 2 years or something like that. But yeah, it's a crazy world. And, I think it's the best time to be
Yeah.
alive. And, I live in
It
Seattle.
is.
I look around, everyone's very pessimistic. And I always, whenever there's a conversation around, the world's so hard, this and that, I'm like, well, let me tell you why I'm optimistic. And that's my entrance to bring in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And to the degree that I got a little dark there, I think we have to be realistic. But hopefully what you caught was, I'm saying this is opportunity too, that a videographer that takes their inherent skills and talents and then adds this amazing tool of AI has the ability to take that genre, that skill, to a level that's never been seen before. But those that fight it, and it's the same with Bitcoin, right? You can fight the future. I saw this in the personal computer industry. You know how many people in 1985 and 1990 said they'll never own a computer, they'll never use a computer, how they could not fathom what they would ever do with it. And a decade later, by the end of the 90s, essentially in every home in America, there was a personal computer. And in every schoolroom, there was a computer. And then fast forward another 10 years, and now it's not just one in every home and one in every classroom, but one with every person, and many people with more than one. And so, but those people and companies that fought it lost. There was massive cost. And so when you recognize that a technology is going to succeed, whether Bitcoin or AI or robotics or drones or these sort of things, you better embrace it, and at a minimum, don't resist it, because you're just, and the recovery of a mistake may not cost just you. It may cost generations of you beyond it. But the opposite is true too. Embrace it, buy your Bitcoin, stack your Bitcoin, learn to use AI, and now you can change the destiny of generations to the positive. That's why I do what I do.
That's beautiful. I want to respect your time here, but I also want to ask you a couple quick fun questions.
Okay,
One
great.
being, what do you like to do outside of Bitcoin when you're not working? What are your hobbies, passions?
I like to train. I still lift weights regularly. I do like to golf. I'm a voracious reader. Highly recommend people read a lot. I can't, and it's fine if you're an audio person, but learn. I mean, maybe that's the more important thing. Like I love to learn, continuing to try to expand, and that's probably my biggest thing. Like is, I want my brain as sharp as possible for as long as possible, and I get a lot of joy from that. And and I enjoy my grandkids now too. That's a pretty cool thing to be a grandpa.
I just became an uncle last year, so that's we've got a new generation. My brother had a baby with his wife, so
Fabulous. Yeah, enjoy
it's
it.
amazing to see, and just looking at them, and it just like I said, I'm 31, and my perspective on the future has changed so much just now thinking about having a family and kids. And so I appreciate hearing from you that you're literally connected to your grandkids. Like you see them almost as yourself. It's not, oh, I'm Bob and I
Yes.
want to, make a bunch of money with Bitcoin. And I see this across Bitcoiners in general, is this low time preference and just wanting to basically make the world a better place, right? It's I think it's something that's
Right.
just inherent to us, and that's largely why I do the podcast. And I think the last thing, I didn't say it earlier, but there's this complacency or this idea that I'm just one person. How can I possibly affect change? It's almost arrogant or egotistical to think that me, Kyle, can change the world or something like that. But when enough of us, that's why this podcast is called We Are Satoshi, when enough of us just take small actions, and I saw it firsthand in Bulgaria, how different people building all
Sure.
over the country are contributing. They may not know each other, but they're actually putting each other in a better position to keep moving the ball down the field and keep building on Bitcoin. So that's just, I really resonate with that message. And Bob, just appreciate everything that you're doing. I learned from you a ton. I'm going to link a couple of your other shows because I think there's a few that go really deep on the conversation we had in the first half of the podcast. So if anyone's interested, just specifically to understand the complexities or the dynamics around mining and how all that stuff is changing, I've got a couple great episodes there. So that's all I got for you, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate your time and for you having me on your show. And hopefully I'll see you in Bulgaria someday. I've been talking to Ivan about hopefully that conference there. I think in the fall, if I remember right.
Yep.
Fall,
it just happened a couple weeks ago, and sounds like you were busy with the family, but you were missed. But it was the first Balkans conference, so they brought together. Ivan probably told you this, but 7 different Balkan countries. It was, it's kind of this funny thing where Balkanization split up all these countries. The wars in these countries got split up, and now Bitcoin's bringing them back together. It's kind of a theme in my film. I'm curious to explore. So, looking forward to seeing you in real life, Bob. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kyle.
All right, that's a wrap on the episode. Thank you guys for watching. If you got any value out of this show, I would love to hear about it. You can tag me on Twitter or Nostr, or just drop a comment below, help spread the message, share this show. And if you haven't already, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening to podcasts. It means a ton and it helps grow this show. So on that note, I've been thinking about ways that I can make this more sustainable, monetize the podcast without selling out or, selling you guys something that I don't genuinely believe in. And the way that I'm going to do that is by being transparent and just sharing what I'm working on and giving you guys opportunities to support it if you believe in it. So first off, I'm going to Bulgaria in just a few weeks to make a film called Build on Bitcoin, The Bulgarian Journey. I'll be traveling the country, learning about the different initiatives and telling the Bulgarian story, hopefully inspiring people to go from Bitcoin holders to actually Bitcoin builders. If you're interested in either supporting the project, $89 gets your name listed in the credits of the film, or just following along. We post all of our updates here on Geyser, and this is our Lightning address if you'd like to donate some sats. Secondly, if you're looking to level up your energy, cognition, and focus, I've got the perfect product for you. It's called Earthy Energy. I founded this company, Earthy, in 2023 because I recognized that the supplement industry was shady, was full of crap, was using things like proprietary blends to protect themselves, but actually hurt their customers because their customers are spending money to make themselves healthier. How can they possibly make themselves healthier if they don't know what they're putting in their body? So we recognized that there was an incentive problem here, and we started Earthy with complete ingredient transparency. So we actually tell you, if you can see that, we tell you every single ingredient in the product and where it's from down to the farm level. So in one scoop of Earthy Energy, you're gonna get almost 5 grams of cacao, which gives it the delicious hot chocolate flavor, some cardiovascular benefits, 120 milligrams of guayusa, which is a clean caffeine source from the Amazon. And it's similar to yerba mate. It gives you this long lasting clean energy without a crash. And then functional mushrooms, lion's mane and cordyceps give you a brain, cognition, memory, focus boost with the lion's mane, as well as some immunity. The cordyceps gives you ATP production, which actually improves cardiovascular performance. It's almost like a little performance enhancing drug, if you know what I mean. So if you are looking to level up your work, your workout, whatever you're working on, the goals and dreams that you have in this life they're attainable, but you need the energy to go after them. And I started this company and I believe in this product, so that's why I'm sharing it with you guys. So if you want to try Earthy, the link is down below. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your guys' support. Till next time.